What is the price of walking through the stones? For some, it is love beyond time. For others, it is heartbreak that never heals. The sound of the stones is like a song only a few can hear, a call that changes everything the moment you answer it. Every step into the circle is not just a journey, is a leap into the unknown, where past and future collide. The journey begins with silence, broken only by the wind brushing through tall grass. The stones at Craigh stand like ancient sentinels, their presence heavy, mysterious, and eternal. To most who pass them, they are nothing more than relics, forgotten by time, but for a chosen few, they hum with a sound deep inside the soul, a sound impossible to ignore. Claire Randall was one of those few. Her life, once steady and clear, would be shattered and remade because she dared to listen. Imagine standing among those towering stones. At first, there is nothing but the whisper of the wind, yet slowly, a vibration rises through the ground. It is not a sound you hear with your ears but with your bones, your heart, and your blood. It pulls you closer, drawing you toward the center, daring you to touch the cold surface of a stone older than memory itself. For Claire, curiosity became destiny. In a single moment, her world of the 1940s disappeared. The stones did not ask her permission, they did not give her time to prepare. One heartbeat she was reaching for a plant on the hill. The next she was falling into a storm of light and sound. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in her own time. The smell of smoke, the crack of muskets, the flash of redcoats told her she had landed in a world that was dangerous, raw, and alive with history. She had crossed into 1743. This was the first crossing. The first journey through the stones that set everything in motion. It was the beginning of an adventure that would not only test Claire but also bring her face to face with the man who would change her life forever. Jamie Fraser. Without the stones, their paths would never have crossed. Without the stones, the story of Outlander would never exist. But stepping through is not just a gift, it is a curse. The power of the stones is not gentle. They tear you away from your home, from your family, from everything you know. They demand sacrifice. Some who try to pass through do not survive the pull. Others are thrown into times they cannot escape. Claire was lucky or perhaps unlucky depending on how one looks at it. For every journey through the stones brings both light and shadow. Even from the very start, the stones carried more questions than answers. Who built them? Why do they sing to only a few? And most important of all, what price must every traveler pay? Claire's first crossing was only the beginning. Many more would follow hers, Jamie's children, and even generations yet to come. Each time, the stones would take something while giving something back, reminding us that no journey through them is ever free. The mystery of the stones lies not in their shape or their age, but in the way they bind lives together across centuries. They are the heartbeat of Outlander, the silent guardians of love, loss, and destiny. Every time someone touches their surface, history itself trembles. Claire was the first we followed, but she was not the last. Her story lit the path, and through her, we began to understand that the stones do not just move people, they move fate itself. It began with a simple walk on a quiet hill. A morning that should have been ordinary. Claire Randall had no reason to believe her life would be ripped apart within seconds. She was a healer, a woman of science. Grounded in the world she knew, the world of the 1940s. She had survived a war, had returned to her husband Frank, and was trying to rebuild a marriage shaped by years of separation. Everything should have settled into peace, yet fate, hidden inside the stones of Craigh, had different plans. The moment Claire touched the standing stone, she was consumed by a force beyond her understanding. It was like falling without falling, like being ripped apart and put together again in a storm of sound and light. Her body was thrown into another century, but her mind could not grasp it yet. She stumbled through the forest, confused and terrified, until she realized something was terribly wrong. The clothes of the soldiers, the muskets they carried, the sound of horses' hooves on dirt roads, none of it belonged to the 20th century. She had fallen through time. In those first terrifying hours, Claire was not just a stranger in a new land, she was prey. The 18th century was no place for a woman alone. The English soldiers who found her did not see her as a lost traveler. They saw her as a prize. Their danger closed around her quickly, but fate once again twisted the story. For out of the wild Scottish woods came a band of Highlanders, men rough and fierce, who pulled her from the hands of the redcoats. Among them was a young man with fiery hair and eyes that carried both pain and strength, Jamie Fraser. That meeting was no accident. The stones had not brought her back for nothing. Claire's skills as a healer quickly became her protection, as the Highlanders had wounds that needed tending. Yet with every herb she applied and every bandage she wrapped, she tied herself deeper into their world. The more she fought to return to her own time, the more she was pulled into theirs. Jamie, especially, became the anchor she could not resist. His injuries gave her reason to stay close, but his kindness gave her reason to care. At first, Claire tried to convince herself that her heart belonged to Frank, the husband waiting for her in the 1940s. But time has its own rules, and the stones had already set her path. Life with Jamie was not just survival, it was awakening. He treated her as an equal in a time when women were often dismissed. He listened to her, protected her, and slowly, without either of them choosing it, love began to grow. A love so strong that it would challenge time itself. But that first journey was not only about love, it was about danger. Claire was caught between two worlds, neither safe. The English saw her as suspicious, the Scots did not fully trust her, and every choice she made risked exposing her as something unnatural. She could not tell anyone the truth, that she had come through the stones, for who would believe such madness? To reveal it would mark her as a witch. To hide it meant carrying a secret heavy enough to crush her. Every moment in the 18th century was survival, but also transformation. Claire was no longer just a healer from the 1940s, was becoming something more, someone shaped by both knowledge and instinct. The stones had stripped her of comfort and control, but in return, they had given her the chance to live a life that was raw, dangerous, and breathtaking. Her first journey was the spark that lit the fire of Outlander. Without it, there would be no Jamie and Claire, no story of love that spans centuries, no family whose fate is forever bound to the stones. That step through Craigh done was not just the beginning of a story, it was the rewriting of destiny. And from that moment, nothing, not even time itself, could undo what had begun. Love is often tested by distance, but what happens when that distance is measured not in miles but in centuries? For Jamie Fraser and Claire Randall, love was not just a feeling. It was a bond strong enough to fight war, betrayal, and the tearing apart of time itself. Their story was not only about finding each other, it was about losing each other, again and again, and still choosing to fight their way back. That is their legacy. After the rising in Scotland turned against the Highlanders, the shadow of the Battle of Culloden loomed large. Jamie knew he would likely die on the battlefield, and Claire, pregnant with their child, knew she would die with him if she stayed. It was then that the stones became more than mystery. They became salvation. In one of the most heartbreaking choices of her life, Claire returned through the stones to the 20th century, leaving Jamie behind. It was not a choice made out of desire, but of survival. She carried not only her unborn daughter but the weight of their love, torn apart by history. For 20 years, Claire lived in a world that no longer fit her. She raised Brianna, trying to give her daughter a normal life, but her heart was chained to the highlands of the past. Frank gave her stability, yes, but he could never erase the memory of Jamie Fraser. Every glance at Brianna's red hair reminded her of the man she had lost. It was not only love that bound her to Jamie, it was legacy. Their daughter was living proof of a bond that no stone, no time, could erase. Jamie, meanwhile, endured a different kind of punishment. Left behind in the 18th century, he faced Culloden and survived against all odds. But survival did not bring peace. He lived in the shadows of Scotland, branded as an outlaw, carrying the ghost of Claire with him every day. He thought she was gone forever, safe in another time, but he also knew he had lost the only true piece of his soul. He continued because he had to, but every sunrise was emptier without her. Then, fate bent once more. Claire discovered that Jamie had lived. With that discovery came a question that could break or heal her heart. Should she go back again? She had built a life in her own century, raised a daughter, and yet, how could she deny herself the chance to see him again? To touch him, to breathe the same air as him. The pull of the stones was not just a mystery anymore, it was a promise, and Claire chose to honor it. She returned, stepping once again through the veil of time, and into Jamie's arms. Their reunion was not soft, but fiery. 20 years of longing poured into a single moment, and once again, time itself bowed to their love. Their legacy is not simply their own happiness, but what they built together despite the centuries. Through hardship, they created a family stretched across time. Brianna, born in the 20th century, would one day choose to follow her mother through the stones. She would find her father, meet him not as a memory but as flesh and blood. Roger, too, would step into the past out of love for her. And so the legacy of Jamie and Claire did not end with them. It echoed forward, shaping the next generation, binding children and grandchildren to a destiny they could not escape. The Stones never offered an easy path. They demanded sacrifice at every turn. Yet Jamie and Claire's love endured, transforming separation into strength, pain into purpose. Their story is proof that love does not belong to one lifetime. It moves through time, leaves traces in history, and builds a legacy that even the Stones cannot silence. For Jamie and Claire, the question was never whether love could survive across centuries, it was whether they could survive long enough to live it. And time after time, against all odds, the answer was yes. Every child grows up hearing stories, but for Brianna Fraser, the stories her mother told were not bedtime tales, they were confessions of impossible truth. Imagine learning that your father was not the man who raised you, but a warrior who lived 200 years in the past. Imagine being told that you exist because your mother once fell through time, loved a Highlander, and bore his child before returning to her own century. For Brianna, the weight of that knowledge was more than history, it was identity. She was a child of 2 centuries, belonging to both, and neither. Brianna could have ignored the pull of the past. She could have lived her life safely in the 20th century, carrying her mother's secrets like locked treasure. But the truth has a way of demanding to be faced. When danger threatened the people she loved most, Brianna made a decision that would shape her forever. She would follow the path her mother had taken, step through the Stones, and find Jamie Fraser, the father she had never met. Her crossing was not a romantic adventure. It was a leap into uncertainty, driven by desperation and courage. The moment she touched the stone, she was torn away from everything she knew: electricity, safety, modern freedom, man thrust into a century where a woman could easily vanish without protection. Unlike her mother, Brianna did not come armed with medical skills or years of experience. She came armed only with determination, the fire of her Fraser blood, and the hope that love for a father she had never seen would be enough to guide her. But Brianna was not alone in this journey. Roger Wakefield, the historian who loved her with every part of his soul, could not let her face the past alone. He too crossed the Stones, though he feared them, though he knew the dangers waiting on the other side. His journey was different from Brianna's. It was not to find family, but to protect the woman he loved. And in that choice, Roger proved himself as much a Fraser as the blood heirs of Jamie and Claire. For love, too, is legacy. Together, Brianna and Roger faced trials that tested them in ways no modern life could have prepared them for. Their love was pulled apart by lies, by separation, by violence, and yet, like Brianna's parents before them, they found strength in their bond. Each moment of suffering became a lesson in survival. Each reunion reminded them that they were building not just a life for themselves, but a bridge between centuries. Brianna's greatest challenge was not only survival, it was forgiveness. She had to face betrayal, cruelty, and the raw truth of what it meant to live in a century where power often belonged to those with the sharpest blade. Yet through it all, she carried her mother's courage and her father's fire. She grew into herself in the past, not as a shadow of Claire or Jamie, but as Brianna Fraser Mackenzie, a woman who could fight, endure, and still love. Roger's test was different. The Stones had taken him away from everything familiar. A man of books and history, he had to learn how to be a man of action. He was no warrior like Jamie, but he became a protector in his own way. His strength was not in the sword, but in loyalty, resilience, and the steady love that refused to break. Roger's choice to stay in the past for Brianna proved that sometimes legacy is not carried in blood, but in devotion. Their crossroads was more than personal. By choosing the Stones, Brianna and Roger bound themselves to the Fraser legacy. They ensured that Jamie and Claire's love would not only survive through them, but multiply in their children. Their decision to stay in the past was not simply about family, it was about belonging. They understood that the Stones were not just portals, but threads weaving their destinies together. The Stones had stolen much from the Frasers' time: peace, safety, but through Brianna and Roger, they also gave something priceless: continuity. Their children would carry not just the blood of Jamie and Claire, but the courage of 2 generations who had chosen love over fear. And so, the story of the Frasers became not only a tale of lovers torn across centuries, but of a family determined to write their future, no matter what century they called home. In every story of time travel, there is one question that lingers: what is carried through the centuries, and what is lost? For the Frasers, the answer was always blood. Love could bend time, devotion could survive distance, but blood was the unbreakable thread that tied them all together. It is no accident that one of the most powerful themes in Outlander is whispered in the words, "Blood of my blood, bone of my bone." These are not just vows of marriage, they are the truth of family. A truth the stones could never erase. Jaime Fraser's legacy did not live only in his name. It lived in the children who bore his spirit, though fate scattered them across centuries. With Craigh, he had Brianna, child raised in the 20th century but carrying the fire of the Highlands in her veins. With Geneva Dunsany, he fathered William Ransom, a boy who would grow up believing another man was his father, yet who carried the Fraser blood all the same. Two children, born into two different times, both shaped by a man who never intended to be more than a soldier, a husband, and a father. But Jaime's bloodline was not simple, it was tangled in secrets and sacrifice. William could not know the truth, for to reveal it would have endangered them all. Jaime chose distance over honesty, pain over joy. Because sometimes loving a child means protecting them from knowledge that would destroy their world. This silence was his sacrifice. He could never claim William as his own, never hear him say the word father, but the bond remained, unspoken yet unbroken. Brianna, on the other hand, was born of love, proof that even centuries apart, destiny could not break Jaime and Craigh. Her journey through the stones was not just about finding her parents. It was about claiming her place in a family that time itself had tried to scatter. She was Jaime's blood of his blood, though she had been raised without him. And when father and daughter finally met, centuries melted away. Blood had triumphed over time. This themed bloodline, sacrifice, and connection is the very heart of Blood of My Blood. The upcoming chapter in the Outlander universe. It is not simply a prequel. It is a reflection of everything Jaime and Claire's story has stood for. Parents shaping children, children carrying forward the hopes and burdens of those before them. It reminds us that love is not always gentle, is often heavy, demanding choices that wound as much as they heal. The stones themselves seem to recognize this truth. Not everyone can hear their call. Not everyone can survive their crossing. Perhaps it is not chance, but blood, that allows some to pass. A gift passed down through generations, binding certain families to the fate of the stones. The Frasers were not chosen by accident, they were chosen by blood. Each journey through time, whether by Craigh, Brianna, or Roger, is a continuation of that ancient inheritance. But every gift demands a cost. For the Frasers, the cost was separation, suffering, and sacrifice. Craigh lost 20 years with Jaime. Jaime lost William. Brianna lost her childhood with her true father. Roger lost his modern life to stay in the past. Each sacrifice was carved into their story, but each sacrifice also strengthened their bond. Because in the end, the stones did not just steal, they also gave. They gave reunions, children, and legacies that would outlast centuries. Blood of my blood, bone of my bone. These words are not only vows whispered between lovers. They are promises carried from parent to child, from one century to the next. They remind us that even when time divides, blood remembers. And as the Outlander saga continues, it is this truth that shines brightest. The stones may bend time, but they can never break family.